For 16 years, we've been building a site that's been called innovative, insightful, and informative. Now there's a new name for it. We're now NBCnews.com.
All Saints Catholic Church in Hayward, California. Hardly the sort of place a detective would expect to get a hot tip in a murder case. But that's exactly what happened. It was the priest who called the police, wound up talking to Inspector Ritchie, and told him a story about an odd encounter with a young woman who came to see him seeking solace of some kind.
It was actually outside of an office in a patio area. Then he asked her several times, do you want to go into a confessional? She said no. So that's why he was able to talk to us about it. And he said that she was wearing a medical type scrubs, same physical build characteristics of Giselle, and she was asking for forgiveness for something that she had not yet done.
Wait a minute, she asked for forgiveness for a sin
That's what
she hadn't committed.
That's the interpretation that the priest had got. That was roughly at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the day that Michelle went missing.
Ritchie was convinced Giselle Esteban killed Michelle Lay. So was prosecutor Butch Ford. But they didn't know how she did it, or when she did it, or where she did it, or more important, what she did with the body.
If you don't have a body, it makes the case more difficult.
And so Ritchie and the other investigators with the Hayward PD continued the tedious work of building a murder case without a body. They ran fingerprints. They sent DNA out for testing. They interviewed witnesses, all quietly, out of sight of the family and press. They tested a strand of hair found in Michelle's car. It turned out to be Giselle's. Some of her touched DNA on the turn signal, too. But since the two knew each other, that wasn't enough evidence to make an arrest. So they checked Giselle's cell phone records, found that her phone, like Michelle's, left a trail in the hours after Michelle vanished. And what do you know?
The locations that Michelle's phone went, Giselle's phone also went.
As if they're traveling together.
Yes.
The eavesdropping electronics was closing in. Here was surveillance video showing Giselle trying to access the nursing school's computers the night before Michelle's disappearance. And here, the scene at the Apple store the day after Michelle vanished. Esteban getting Michelle's iPhone unlocked and later using it at the Chuck E. Cheese. But still, it wasn't enough. Until the lab results finally came back from evidence seized that very first night in Giselle Esteban's apartment, specifically from her shoes. Those tests uncovered a trace amount of blood that belonged to Michelle. Only one explanation for that. And so on September 7th, 104 days after Michelle Lay's disappearance, Inspector Fraser Ritchie went to Giselle Esteban's house for a final visit.
We showed up on that September morning, waited for her to come out of her house. I pulled up in front with two other investigators. We got out of the car. She looked at me very nonchalantly, dismissive. What now? You're under arrest. Not for what, anything. It was just like a matter of fact. She was waiting for it. There was no sign of guilt. There was no sign of remorse. There was nothing. It was she just, okay.
And when the news was announced, Michelle's family knew Giselle, knew her as one of Michelle's closest friends, and they were stunned.
I never suspected her and thought the worst until we knew for sure.
You know, I didn't think it was her. When Giselle was having problems, Michelle would go to these counseling sessions with her, all because she felt that Giselle would always be her friend, and that was her last text to Giselle, was that no matter what, you'll always be my friend.
And now with Giselle Esteban's arrest, the Lay family found themselves in a strange paradox. Glad someone would finally be held accountable for Michelle's disappearance, yet refusing to accept she was dead. To them, the fact that no body had been found meant there was still hope, however slim, that they might find her alive.
I was still hoping, without finding my sister's remains, I was still holding out hope. Until it was definitive, we were going to fight for her.
And so, on September 17th, 113 days after Michelle disappeared, 10 days after the arrest, the family mounted yet another search. This time, they were joined by Carrie McGonigal, whose daughter Amber Dubois had been kidnapped and murdered in San Diego 2 years earlier. And like Mark Klass before her, Carrie formed an organization to help find the missing. She'd brought her new search dog with her, a search dog in training.
And she was acting weird. She was jumping all over the place. She was barking, wanted to get away from me. And as I buckled her up, she took off from me and ran. And so I started running after her, and she comes back, and she jumps up on me and takes off again. And I followed her, and she was just standing still. And so I reached down to put her leash on, and I noticed some twine rope sticking out of the ground, and then some bones next to it.
It was the skeletal remains of a young woman, unidentified. Michelle's cousin Christine was back at the command center.
I remember Search Director Brad Dennis took a break, and he looked at me. He's like, "Hey, babe, we'll be right back." He never leaves the search center. So he left, and I was like, "Oh, something must have happened. They must have found something." But he was like, "I just need a break. I'm going out there and looking at, some random evidence they found."
But then her phone rang. A reporter with a tip from someone in the search party.
And he told me, "Oh, I heard they found Michelle's body. Can you comment on that?" And I just started shaking. I told him, "We haven't found her." But I knew that they did. When I got that call from the reporter, I knew.
But there wasn't confirmation, not yet. The medical examiner still had to match up dental records, and that, the family was told, could take a few days.
It might sound really dumb now, but I was still really stubborn about it. I just didn't. There was nothing that could tell me that Michelle was dead. But we all stayed in a hotel room because we were just hiding. I think no one knew where we were, just in a hotel room for the next few days. And then I think about 4 days later, the Hayward police came to our hotel, and they told us that she had been confirmed to be found through her dental records.
At that point, you couldn't pretend anymore.
Yeah.
After 4 months, the family's long and determined search to find Michelle was over. But their goal, no matter how remote, was always to bring her home alive. That she was found dead was a blow that took them to their knees.
That was one of the very few times I think I really let myself cry. Part of me was relieved that it's over, that we had found her and we had brought her home. And then a majority of me was very angry. And it just felt hollow.
Now there was one thing left to do: make sure Michelle got justice. But that, it turned out, was not going to be so easy.
Coming up, Giselle on trial, and her defense strategy surprises everyone.
You have to find a better way than to vilify the victim.
Would it work? When Vanished continues.